What's going on, everybody? Doc, Average Gamer Guys, back yet again. More Escape from Tarkov action. And I'm not exactly sure where this video is going to fall in our series of videos, whether it be teaching Tarkov or maybe some of the news, the Tarky Town news, as I've come to start to call it. But I wanted to spend at least a few minutes and just talk dynamic loot. I've been having some conversations on stream, and I've been doing a lot of reading on comments and obviously seeing some of the feedback from the player base and some of the larger names in the community. And I thought it would just be an interesting video to get out there from a discussion standpoint on generating ideas and just to get some feedback from you guys as a community and my viewer base on what you think. So I'm not going to call this a rant because I'm going to try to be very constructive about my comments. There are certainly things that I like and certainly things that I don't like, and I'm trying to really see multiple sides of the vision of this and how the loot is going moving forward. I have some personal examples having been playing this game, obviously, of where I think there certainly is improvements and opportunities for improvement. But I do understand a lot of the good points that have been made from other community members and folks, even maybe yourself, if you have some time and have been playing. So that's what this video is going to be. Constructive. I don't know what I'll have up in the background. Probably some gameplay, some looting, something else. Hopefully, so you're not just sitting here looking at me talk this whole time. But I thought this would be an interesting video, and I really just felt like I needed to share some of my thoughts, at least in the current moment, for how this is going. So a discussion on dynamic loot, and let's go ahead and jump into it. It's probably fair as we start to say that my initial reaction was probably very much on the negative side for the changes. And I have kind of grown in that opinion, and again have been doing a lot of research and comments and reading other comments and just getting some other perspectives. And again, over on Twitch, we were streaming this past weekend and having some discussions about it. So I formulated my thoughts, and I'll try to keep them as concise as I can to keep this video relatively short. But I did, again, want to kind of share those. My first one is that at this initial implementation, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I understand BSG, Nikita, and their vision going forward. It was interesting. I watched actually Tweak's video the other day or 2 days ago, or a couple days ago. I'm not sure when this is going to post. And he made an interesting comment about this game and you really not ever being able to have, million or multi-million ruble runs or raids, with the exception of maybe finding a very expensive key. Like a key card is obviously kind of shoves it into that category, but that is not going to be very consistent or very common. And other than that, there are certainly some keys that will net you, and it's very much dependent on when the market is. But he talked about that as a good point, and I spent some time thinking about that, and I actually do agree. I know there's a lot from a perspective of why the changes were made. I think to a certain extent more than probably are being let on. It doesn't go past me that to a certain effect or instance, this does impact RMT. Maybe not as significantly as it does the normal player base. So that's kind of a caveat to that. And there are certainly cheats out there that can be used to find the loot and suck it up right away and get all the good stuff anyways. And obviously they're making money. But arguably, it certainly is harder to generate that. And I will tell you, I have been running labs over the last 2 weeks plus, again, depending on when this video goes up. And it has been pretty much cheater free. And I wouldn't ever say that I see them a ton. But I would see them often enough to know that it is still kind of a problem. And I just haven't seen anybody. Raids in labs, to be frank, have been very quiet. A couple of teams at best, if it play during the weekends. This last weekend, from recording this, we played probably 5 or 6 raids, and we had decently full lobbies, but nowhere near the multi 3 or 4 man teams. It was a couple of 2-man teams, and that was about it. So But I do agree with the base consensus that you shouldn't be able to go into a raid and just continuously farm, you know, 1,000,000+ rubles very easily. Now, obviously, again, if you find a very high quality item, if you find a LEDX, if you find a GPU, and then you're successful in getting out of the raid, killing a player, maybe killing a boss, and then escaping, you're certainly going to have a good raid. But that's not going to be consistent. The other point that was made in conjunction with this is it would be very interesting to see this current loot system at the beginning of a wipe. They BSG and I think a lot of the community have said that there's a big voice that it is frustrating to a certain extent that you can start a wipe and within a handful of weeks you have people running basically meta end game gear. They have said very specifically they're trying to move away from meta guns. They want to get away from meta ammo, and they're trying to limit or, you know, reduce that as much as they can. So at least people are using different options. In addition, if this economy was like it is right now at the beginning of this wipe, it would actually be very interesting to see how long it would take some to progress. With that being said, there are certainly going to be people that put in more time than other people. I played this game a lot, not nearly as much as, you know, somebody that streams it full time or somebody that this is literally the only game that they play, but I do have a lot of hours in it. And I will tell you, it would be very interesting to see even kind of more so, I would say, not quite the hardcore, but the folks that log in every day and do some raids. It would be interesting to see the progression of that player base and what I would think would be more of the majority and how they would progress through the wipe. And I think you would see a lot of folks not quite getting to end game gear, right? Because if they did use end game gear and they weren't making as much money as they were, I think you would see that kind of curtail a little bit. It would take them longer to get there, and if they ran a couple of those kits, then they're out of money. I know that everything in this game is a test on trying to make it better for the future. We may not always see that, and I'm really trying to use that as the perspective and the basis for this whole video in my thoughts around dynamic loot, because I do think it is a good test. I certainly hope that there are changes, but I do agree that I don't necessarily want to make it harder of a grind. You should be able to make rubles. You have to be able to make rubles in this game, or else there won't be any enjoyment. And in my opinion, although I don't think I'm in the broad consensus of this, I don't think you should have to use your scav in order to make rubles. I think that should be there as a supplement. I think that is a unique playstyle and something you can go have fun with. You can certainly use it to make money, and it is a great money-making tool if you're struggling to do that. However, with those things being said, I don't think you should have to rely on that in order to get your kit or make money in between your PMC raids in order to fund that. Because to be honest with you, there are going to be future scav karma changes. It's going to take longer to level that up. And I didn't have a huge interest in grinding that because I want to run my PMC. I want to progress in my tasks. I want to move forward with my gameplay. I want to get things unlocked and opened up and have more options. And I just want to quest. That's where I find the enjoyment with this game. And some people don't, some people do. Some people fall into the middle, and that's totally okay how you play the game. I just think the dynamic loot system at the end of the day has to find a way where people can still be successful in finding loot and making money, specifically finding items that they need for quests. This is my one big concern as we move forward. And I necessarily won't be able to test it because I've completed all of those quests. I need like 2 items for Kappa and to get to level 71, and I'm there. And I did it all before the dynamic loot change. With those things being said, if you're jumping into this wipe and you're trying to find a LEDX or some GPUs or some of these other really hard to find items, and you now don't have a consistent spot to at least attempt to go get there, that I think is going to be a big frustration. And I think that is where you probably don't hear a ton of the player base talking about it at this point. If this was to be like it was at the beginning of a wipe, I think you would have a lot of people being very upset because those are walls. Now, you can make the argument you can craft a lot of those things. You certainly can. But you can't craft everything. And you have to be able to find some of that stuff in Raid. And I know it's still out there to be found. The caveat to all of that is it's still out there to be found. It's somewhere. It's just not in that one specific shelf in that one specific location. I think there has to be some. And it really centers around the conversation around hotspots. I'm not against hotspots in it. I'm against it because it allows people to grind money. I'm not against it for the fact that if you go into a raid and you bring a buddy in or a 3-man and you end up getting into a fight with another 3-man as the closest two spawns push for resort, and you win that fight and your reward is not only that gear, but you find that LEDX that you need for that quest, that's huge. You've earned it. Now, certainly they don't want people running in naked and hitting that room right away and SJ6ing out, but they've done a lot in order to prevent that. And if that's how you want to run your raids and you want to have a very low survival rate, which, you know, at the end of the day doesn't really matter, you can play that way. So I think, again, there's going to be a balance, and I hope there's a balance. But I don't think necessarily hotspots, maybe less of them, but I don't think hotspots are a bad thing to draw some of that PvP action, get some of those things. And to be honest with you, there are so many quests in this game that require player kills and require you to get into that PvP action. It's nice sometimes to be able to go and find that PvP. So my base thought there is hotspots aren't bad. Find a way to spread those out. And maybe, again, maybe it's a section of rooms now can have that spawn in it instead of it just being that single room. So now you have to check, you know, 3 or 4 rooms in order to get lucky. I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm perfectly fine with the spawns in the room moving. I'm perfectly fine with the loot on that floor moving around. I was having an interesting conversation with Sloth over the weekend about there being, you know, types of loot in places that make sense. The tech stores, for instance. It makes perfect sense on Interchange that you're going to find tech items in there. I don't think that's going to drastically change, and I certainly hope it doesn't. Because, again, I think you have to have some reliability in this to be able to find some of those items. It's the same thing with the back of Ollie and the back of Idea. You should be able to go there and find your bolts and your screws and your corrugated hose and the things that you would find in a hardware store. Makes perfect sense to be there. Now, again, can you sprinkle some great loot in there? Yeah, you've got computer terminals. You've got some cool places. You've got duffel bags and a whole lot of other locations that you could start sprinkling some cool loot around if you want to take the time to do that. The other thought I've had is that this game is already very much a grind from a scavenger hunt standpoint. I feel like in its current state, it has become so much of a scavenger hunt that is the main focus. And to a certain extent, that's going to always be true. Because, again, you've got to be able to make some money and you've got to be able to get some items and find some good ammo and those kinds of things. But at the same token, it also has to be playable for everybody else that maybe doesn't want to necessarily do that. Raid in, raid out, and constantly be searching. So I think my base point with this is not a question of, like, where specifically is that good loot. I would like a little bit better understanding and clarity of, like, what types of spawns and what types of locations are those things available to spawn in. Right now, I think, you know, they've added some loot, and they've added some loot probably in a lot of spots that have had loot in them before, but we haven't seen such a volume that it's very hidden and it's very new. And they have talked about moving that so they can track heat maps and understand where that stuff is going. Which I think is cool. That gives them the opportunity for things like events. You know, they've talked about removing ammo or removing meds from raids or opening every door. I'm cool with that for a weekend or a week or whatever the case may be. Totally fine. That brings some accessibility and also brings some challenge to the game to make it a diverse environment and make things change in the market. All of that stuff is fine. I'm totally on board with that. I think those are great ideas. I think for me, just a little bit better clarity on, like, what are some consistent, like, types of spawn locations, you know, on tables, on shelves, and can it really be anywhere? Because what I personally don't want to do is spend the time walking from corner to corner on a map and looking on the ground. I know that's not the case, but to a certain extent, it almost feels like that a little bit right now. And especially with some of the challenges we've had with certain loot spawning in unobtainable locations and things dropping through the floor like they did in Reserve, I feel like there's might be some of that going on as well, which is compounding this problem to a very small, but compounding the problem to an extent. My last comment, or one of my last comments and thoughts around it, is we have to still find a way to make rooms that are locked valuable, because if you don't put anything valuable behind the lock in that room, there's no reason to have the key. And what I think you're going to find is those loot rooms that don't have good loot in them anymore, let's take Reserve or Shoreline, for instance. What's going to end up happening at the start of a wipe when people know that the LEDX and those other things aren't going to spawn in there, one, those keys are not going to be worth anything. They'll still sell to the trader really well, and I know BSG is probably trying to shift that so that keys, hopefully are a little bit more accessible and maybe easier to get, especially with kind of the key changes and what they've done as far as posting it on the flea market. But what you're going to end up finding is that then the quest keys are literally going to be the only ones that are expensive. And that is going to be another wall for players to progress, unlock traders, open things up. The quests are hard enough in and of themselves. We don't need another block of not being able to really make sufficient money to then buy that key on the flea market. So I think we need to find a nice balance of like rooms still being good to open, maybe honestly some rooms becoming better to open, which is what I said about spreading that loot out, maybe putting it in rooms that really haven't been and the keys are super cheap. There's tons of rooms on dorms, for instance, that the keys are worth literally nothing because you open it into a jacket. And now that might be a good place to go look, speaking of those things, so I might be buying some keys after this. But I just think there's a balance to be made for things that are locked behind a room and the keys in the game, because it's also very exciting to be in a raid and find a 301 key and then know that you can then go to that room and have some success on that map, maybe even early wipe before people have access to it, and potentially find some great loot and make a little bit of money to boost yourself and have some economy at the beginning, or get one of those really hard find and raid quest items that you need, like that LEDX, that you can just hang on to and you don't have to worry about it as you move forward. And I know quests are going to change, things are going to get more, things are going to always change, but I think the found and raid status piece of that isn't going to. I think that is good for player progression in the long run, but again, it just has to be findable. And hopefully, as they adjust these things and we get some better awareness as a community for maybe other places to look, then I think that will be an interesting thing. I'm all for, and I should say this, I'm all for things changing inside this game, like I said at the beginning, as continual tests to allow them to tweak it, let BSG and Nikita really shape their vision for the game. This game has always not been catered to a casual audience. What I think they have to be very careful of, there's a big difference between a casual audience and kind of that audience that is a step above them, but not so hardcore that they're playing thousands of hours in this game. There is, again, people out there that are going to play this game every night, and they might only play for 2 hours. That certainly is long enough to progress and progress very well. Learn maps, have a lot of fun in this game. I think some of the changes right now might be pushing some of that player base out. This should be, especially with these long wipe cycles that we're getting over the last couple, this should be a game that you don't necessarily feel like you have to push at the beginning to get some progress, that you can jump in maybe a month after and, have a journey and start playing it and still feel like you can be successful. And I think a big part of that is always going to be the ability to go in and make money without killing players and without killing bosses. I think, obviously, if you can kill scav bosses, that is a huge benefit to you, and I think a good way to make money. But there's got to be a way. So hopefully those are constructive thoughts. I really do want to hear what you guys think in the comments below. I'm very interested. Certainly, if you have any good loot spots that you're having some success with, I would love for you to share those. At some point in this video, maybe right now, I will post up a loot guide kind of video. If you're having some trouble finding loot, I'll give a quick rundown that duffel bags, jackets, all of your containers, so your weapon boxes, your tech crates, your med boxes, your medical crates, all that stuff still seems to be pretty good. There's still some higher loot areas. Kiba, for instance, still has some good stuff. Maybe not quite as solid as it always consistently was. But if you open that and you get in there first, you're still gonna find some good things. And there's still plenty of loot, I believe, to find, maybe with the exception of labs. So it's out there. It's out there to be found, and it's certainly out there to explore. So I really welcome any comments, discussion down below. I would really welcome you to come and chat with me over on Twitch. We do stream Fridays and Saturdays, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, and then randomly throughout the week. And I would love to just have some discussion about where we think it needs to be. I would also really appreciate any constructive feedback on ideas and how they could do certain things. I think events are going to be a really interesting thing on being able to ebb and flow and add items and not add items and change the, how dynamic it is and what spawns. I just caution Nikita and BSG with that from the perspective that not everybody can always play on those events or for those weeks or weekends. So there's still got to be a way. But again, welcome any comments below, any discussion below. Hopefully this was an interesting video for you. And I certainly did want to get my thoughts and kind of my perspective out there. And hopefully it's well received. And I look forward to hearing, again, counterpoints and other constructive thoughts on some of the things I said, because I'm definitely open to new opinions and ideas as well. The baseline and last thing I will say is I want this game to be fun. I certainly want it to be successful. I've put a lot of hours into it, and I do genuinely enjoy this. I genuinely enjoy the gameplay and the feel of this game. I enjoy how hard it is. I hate it sometimes, but I do enjoy how hard it is. But at the end of the day, I do still want it to be, successful. And there's got to be some sort of elements of fun. And it's very hardcore as it is right now. And just finding a nice balance is a good thing. So, yeah, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Thank you for all the support on the channel. And look forward to hearing what you guys have to say in the comments below. I've been Doc, Average Gamer Guys, as always. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next Escape from Tarkov video. Peace.